All right, we're back, and we find ourselves now at The Catcher in the Rye. Um, American classic, and I know what we're thinking when we think of American classics in literature. Classics just kind of tend to not resonate with us very much. We tend to think, oh, they're going to be boring and they're old and so on and so forth. But I assure you, The Catcher in the Rye is one of those books that I feel like is a rite of passage for every 17-year-old, 16, 17, 18-year-old to read. You're at the perfect age to really read and appreciate Catcher in the Rye. And I really think you're going to get something. You're going to get something out of this novel, whether you love it or hate it, which usually is how it goes. People either love it or they absolutely hate it. But either way, they usually find themselves remembering it, and I think that's really cool. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the intro stuff to Catch in the Rye, and I'm just going to walk you through kind of basically, um, you know, the author and the time period and what the book is about, and then we'll call it a wrap for a day. So, The Catch in the Rye was written by J.D. Salinger, Joseph Daniel Salinger, Jerry David Salinger, excuse me. Um, in 1945. It was first published in 1945. And if you think about what's significant about the year 1945, I'll give you 3 seconds to think about one, two, three. 1945 was the year that World War II ended. And so if you can imagine, the country is in this uh, overall, generally kind of very positive state of mind, right? I always imagine that picture of in Times Square of that sailor kissing that woman, and there's all that confetti, and it's just this really positive time in American history. The war is over and the economy's good, and people are coming home and they're making babies, and it's the start of the baby boom. But amidst, in the middle of all of that positivity, you have this one kid named Holden Caulfield who just he doesn't see it. He doesn't see the positivity. All he sees is fake, phony, disgusting people inhabiting a really gross world. The story is told in first person point of view. So the entire story is told from Holden's perspective. He is the author, he is the protagonist of this story. There's a quote from him: "I'm the most terrific liar you ever saw in your life. It's awful," which is kind of ironic. If he's the protagonist and he's telling us the story, but yet he says he's a terrific liar, how much of him can we honestly trust? So it's kind of a neat thing about this book. And there's a picture of good old JD right down there. So what's it about? What's the book about? The overview. Well, one of the first lines of the book is, I'm not going to tell you my whole autobiography. I'm only going to tell you about these 3 or 4 days that I got a little rundown and so on and so forth. His madman days, as Holden likes to call them. So the whole novel really takes place in 3 to 4 days. It's not his whole autobiography, although he does have flashbacks, as indicated right here, and he will kind of tell you some things about his past that maybe give some indication as to why he is the way he is. But the subject of the novel is very simple. It is about a 17-year-old kid, young man, who is very unhappy with a lot of things. And he's sad about a lot of things. He's frustrated by a lot of things. He's scared by a lot of things. And he wants to share all these things with you. Um, the start of the novel is he has been kicked out of his private school because he is failing almost all of his classes. And so they kick him out. Yet he's terrified of what his parents are going to think. So rather than going home, he runs away to New York City, and that's where the adventure really ensues. And while he's in New York City, all sorts of things, crazy things, really happen to him. He drinks, even though he's not old enough. He smokes a lot. He stays out all night. There's even a chapter in which he hires a prostitute, and then has an altercation with the prostitute's pimp. So, I mean, there's some really kind of interesting things that happen in here. Um, throughout this story, which leads me to this topic of The Catch in the Rye being so controversial. Oh, let me move me right there. Here we go. The Catch in the Rye is often, on a list of banned books from public schools. There are lots of, if you look at the 100 most commonly banned books, Catch in the Rye is often one that you see um, at the top of that list. And the reasons why, the biggest reason, honestly, is the language. Holden cusses quite a bit. There's a couple f bombs. He says, "God damn," I think like 97 times or something. I mean, it's all throughout the novel. So the language is kind of repulsive to some people. A lot of illegal, like underage activities, like smoking and drinking. He does a lot of things that a person his age really shouldn't, legally be allowed to do, yet he finds a way to do them. And so that kind of rubbed people the wrong way. And then he talks very frankly, but kind of confusingly about sex. What does sex look like? Um, what does sex mean to the mind in the mind of a teenager? And if you think about, Catch in the Rye was the first book that really explored these things for teenagers. This is one of the first books in American literature where you have a teenage protagonist, not a child protagonist and not an adult protagonist, but a teenage adolescent protagonist explaining all of the struggles of being an adolescent. So all the young adult lit that you really enjoy reading in a lot of ways has its roots from Catch in the Rye, which is really cool. Um, so for all those reasons, it's just kind of a taboo book, and J.D. Salinger allowed Holden Caulfield to talk about a lot of things that people at that time just didn't really want to talk about. If you've ever seen old episodes of I Love Lucy, or Dick Van Dyke or those kinds of shows, you know how Dick Van Dyke, Rob and Laura Petrie, the main married couple, slept in different beds, right? They slept in twin beds. Or Lucy and Ricky from I Love Lucy said it slept in opposite beds, right? They didn't even show the man and the woman in the bed together. Um, it's that kind of society that we're living in, right? That it's that kind of society the 1950s was occupying. So imagine this book coming out where this kid is talking very frankly about sex and defying authority and getting kicked out of school and doing all the things that that were probably maybe happening but not really discussed. And so that's kind of a cool thing that Catch in the Rye brings forward. Yet it's still, even today, it's still a very, very controversial book. So here are the things that we're going to focus on while we're reading. We're going to look at the language, right? That's one of the biggest things. I think when you start reading Catch in the Rye, and we're going to do a little activity later on in the week, but when you start reading Catch in the Rye, Holden's voice is just fantastic. I cannot stress that enough. His voice is off the charts. I mean, it just hits you, and it sounds like a voice you've never heard before. It sounds very unique. We're going to look at how the author's language and author's word choice can really help convey the tone of a piece, but also how it can help convey, the character's struggles and the character's situations that he finds himself in. So how using specific words and phrases and using the language that he does can really enhance a lot of those things. We're going to look at the culture of the time. I talked earlier, what was it like in the 1950s, late 1940s, early 1950s? What's going on? We're going to talk very frankly about what it means to be a teenager, and that's all you guys. What are the struggles that teenagers face that maybe a lot of adults don't recognize as being quite challenging? And we're also going to talk about this idea of what does it mean to come of age? At what point do you stop being an adult? Excuse me, do you stop being a child and do you become an adult? And what happens in between? And we know it's not just a black and white thing. There's a lot of gray area, and that gray area is kind of tricky. We're going to talk about themes, motifs, and symbols, some more literary concepts. And there's also, I think you're going to pick up on this idea of Peter Pan. We're going to have a little Peter Pan discussion towards the end of the book that I think you'll pick up on. So, and this, by the way, this is one of my favorite quotes. Anyway, I'm sort of glad they've got the atomic bomb invented. If there's another war, I'm going to sit right the hell on top of it. I'll volunteer for it. I swear to God, I will. Which just epitomizes that line, makes me laugh every single time. I'm like, what is he talking about? That's crazy. And it's kind of funny, but at the same time, you see kind of how dark he is, and he's a depressed kid. He's not happy, and that line kind of epitomizes his sense of humor, but also his sense of unhappiness. Um, so we'll say that vernacular thing for later. So we're going to stop there for the day, but that just kind of introduces you to Catch in the Rye. And I will have some screencasts on the language. We will read a little bit from maybe Junie B. Jones, some favorite childhood stuff, and look at the language a little bit closer, kind of comparing Holden Caulfield to Junie B. Jones. We're going to look at some characterization stuff and some themes, motifs, and symbols. So that's kind of what's coming down the pike for the week. Glad you watched this. This same presentation is also on Schoology, so you can flip through it again without listening to my voice, which might be better for some of you. I don't know. Get reading. enjoy. I think you're really gonna like it. All right. See ya.